Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. It is 9 o'clock. This is Patrick Christys tonight with me, Mark Dolan.
A response both to the immediate challenge, which is clearly driven by far-right hatred.
Far-right are a reaction to fear, to discomfort, to unease.
Police prepare for more despicable riots in at least 8 towns and cities this weekend. But did Starmer properly address the legitimate concerns of the British people in his Downing Street address yesterday? Was he right to single out the far right? We'll hear from both sides on that one. Also tonight, someone who is effectively a biological male beating up a woman in the boxing ring tells you everything you need to know about the madness of woke ideology. Does a woman have to die in the ring for people to wake up and realise you cannot change your sex? I'll tackle that next, and let me tell you, the gloves are off. Plus,
Huw Edwards ought to return the salary. I think having been arrested on such serious charges.
should disgraced ex-BBC presenter Huw Edwards return his bumper taxpayer-funded salary and his gold-plated pension after admitting child abuse image charges? I'll speak to a top TV exec about whether he will do the right thing. Also, Harry and Meghan won't come to the UK over safety fears, but are heading to crime-ridden Colombia, which has one of the highest murder rates in the world. I'll be tackling the Duke and Duchess of double standards at 10. And I'll take you through the first of tomorrow's front pages with my top panel of primetime pundits this evening. Journalist and author Hilary Sargent, TV news legend John Sargent, and entrepreneur and social commentator Joanna Jarju. Oh, and Creepy Joe strikes again.
Remember, no serious guys till you're 30. God love.
She was 13. Welcome to hell. An action-packed 2 hours of Friday TV. Woke Harry and Meghan at 10, and the madness of the Olympics and boxing goes bonkers. Let's get to work. Does a woman have to die in the ring for people to wake up and realise you cannot change your sex? That's next.
Very good evening to you. Back to Mark in just a few moments' time. First, though, a look at the headlines at just after 9 o'clock. And despite police warnings, it seems a weekend of planned protests have now begun across the UK. Rallies have stemmed from misinformation online about the suspect of a stabbing spree in Southport. There are additional patrols in Liverpool tonight, and in Sunderland, officers there are describing ongoing disorder. There are reports in Southport tonight that various protests are taking place. You can see there scenes from Sunderland with rioters kicking a taxi and throwing stones, releasing fire cannons, and they were earlier seen interrupting police on the streets, chanting as mounted police and officers in vans took to the roads to keep the peace. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's visited Southport for the second time this week to announce a package of support for the town. During his time there this week, Sir Keir Starmer has praised the town's resilience and announced mental health support and events to bolster local cohesion. Meanwhile, tonight in London, Downing Street has joined with other landmarks across the northwest, lighting up pink over the weekend in memory of the young girls that were killed in the Southport knife attack. 9-year-old Alice de Silva Aguirre, 6-year-old Bebby King and 7-year-old Elsie Stamcombe were killed when a knifeman attacked them on Monday. 8 other children were also injured, along with 2 adults. Well, Robert Jenrick claims the Conservatives lost the July general election because of a broken promise on immigration. The former immigration minister was speaking at the launch of his campaign to become the party leader and to succeed Rishi Sunak. Mr Jenrick also claimed the British political system has, he said, appeared either unwilling or unable to secure the UK's border.
Broke our promise to the British public to deliver controlled and reduced migration and the secure border that the public rightly demand. We allowed the cycle of broken promises to continue. And as a minister, when I concluded that I couldn't secure any more changes to our legal migration system, I resigned from Cabinet last year.
In other news today, organisations are considering their ties with Huw Edwards as plaques have been removed and a mural was painted over in his hometown. It's after he admitted this week to having indecent images of children. The Culture Secretary's calling on the BBC to reclaim £200,000 in salary that Mr Edward received from the broadcaster between his arrest in November and his resignation in April this year. Meanwhile, a former intelligence officer from the National Crime Agency has been jailed for 18 months for viewing hundreds of indecent images of children on his work computer. The court heard how his job gave Adam Taylor from Essex access to the dark web, although his area of work covered drugs and firearms. The 40-year-old admitted the charges dating between 2019 and 2022. We've heard tonight that 96 migrants are suing the UK government, claiming they were badly treated at the Manston Processing Centre in Kent. Their lawyers claim the group were unlawfully detained between September and November of 2022, with allegations also including a lack of access to hygiene products, forced removal of hijabs and reportedly inadequate conditions for children and pregnant women. The Home Office, though, hasn't yet filed a defence. And finally, some good news from the Olympics. 2 silver medals in the pool have added to Team GB's success in Paris today. Ben Proud came second in the men's 50-metre freestyle, while Duncan Scott was runner-up in the men's 200-metre individual medley. And it follows 3 golds today, taking the total now to 27 medals and putting GB 5th in the table. Meanwhile, though, news in the last half hour from the BMX semi-finals. It appears that Kai White has been taken to hospital after a crash. He had, of course, been a medal hope coming into the final stages of the competition. Reports at this stage, though, suggesting he is OK, but has been taken for further checks. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. Much more in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. Happy Friday, one and all. Now, I've always said that the one good thing about woke is that it contains within it the seeds of its own destruction. Enter stage left Imane Khalif, someone with some key genetic characteristics of a biological male, pummeling a female boxer in the ring. If you thought that there is a war against women, their sex-based rights and their safety, look no further than a female athlete almost having her nose broken with the first right hook at the hands of, to all intents and purposes, a bloke. But what would you expect from these dreadful Olympics, the most right-on woke games ever? Having offended 2.6 billion Christians around the world with a piss-take of the Last Supper and Jesus Christ replaced by an obese drag queen, the events in Paris have captured in a short few days everything that is going wrong in the Western world. Imane Khalif may have a complex backstory and genetic abnormalities. It's not an easy situation. But this is an individual with very high levels of testosterone and XY chromosomes, and someone who in the past has failed a gender test to prove themselves a woman. But that doesn't bother the IOC. On their watch, she, her, gets to punch an actual biological woman in the name of sport. So how did that work out then? Well, the Italian female boxer Angela Carini had to withdraw from the match and relinquish her hopes of Olympic gold in less than a minute. That's right, her dream was gone in 60 seconds. She said that she'd never been hit so hard, and the blows were so powerful, she literally feared for her life. But the numpty Olympic organisers, who would struggle to get you drunk in a brewery, were more concerned about fairness to Khalif, who identifies as a female. Of course she does. People are turning themselves inside out trying to explain this individual's gender. Well, the last time I checked a biology textbook, if you have high levels of testosterone and a masculine physique and XY chromosomes, at the very least, you are not a woman. And therefore, you have no place in the ring. Where is the safety for women? Where is the duty of care? Where is the fairness of an obvious physical advantage? People point out that Khalif fought in the Tokyo Olympics 4 years ago. Well, that was a mistake too. They say she lost. I don't care. 2 wrongs don't make a right. In the end, there are just 2 biological sexes, something the world, and especially mad woke progressives captured by a bonkers ideology, seem to have forgotten. But don't take my word for it. Here is the world's most respected fertility expert, Dr. Robert Winston, speaking on the BBC Question Time show. Enjoy.
I will say this categorically, that you cannot change your sex. Your sex actually is there in every single cell in the body. You have a chromosomal sex, you have genetic sex, you have hormonal sex, you have all sorts of different kinds of psychological, brain sex, they're all different. And we are very confused about this, unfortunately.
Aren't we indeed? Hopefully the sheer madness of what is playing out at the Olympics will wake people up to the lunacy of this strange religion, this ungodly cult that says you can change your sex or identify by any number of genders or no genders based upon your mood that day. We are all punch drunk from listening to this nonsense. It's time to deliver a knockout blow to woke ideology. The gloves are off. Let's get reaction now from my top pundits this evening. We have journalist and author Harriet Sargent, former BBC chief political correspondent John Sargent, and entrepreneur and social commentator Joanna Jarju. Listen, I'm showing my age. It takes me half an hour to get across the studio now. Great to see you all. Harriet, let me start with you. This is a complex story, isn't it? Because this individual is not a trans woman as such, but it's my view she has no place in the ring opposite a woman.
Well, I quite agree. I mean, we've had progressives stop Punch and Judy shows, which I used to watch as a child because it's apparently about domestic abuse. And here we have Punch and Judy, you know, on the Olympic stage for everyone to see. And punching up a woman suddenly becomes sort of acceptable entertainment and acceptable competition. And I thought what you just said earlier was absolutely right. I mean, it is very simple. It comes down to, you know, whether you're XX or XY. And most importantly, it comes down to puberty, because when boys go through puberty, they get an advantage. They become 90% stronger than girls. They get 75% more mass in their upper body.
Right, muscle mass and all the rest of it.
Which means that the weakest man has a punch that has 2.5 times the force of the strongest woman. So there is no level playing field, and it is very dangerous.
Joanna, I mean, I don't know if you caught this 60-second boxing match, but I thought it was a horror show, and I don't think it should have happened.
I mean, it is a horror show. Any boxing show, to be honest, to me, is a horror show. But I think that this really shouldn't be weaponised against this individual, actually, because let's be real, you've clarified that it's not a transgender situation. This is somebody who was born a woman, and some of the tests that have been done before have said that she's had high levels of testosterone, but actually 7 in every 1,000 professional female athletes have really high testosterone. And this is the type of thing, and people have been saying this for a while, that this whole transgender argument is then going to get spun and weaponised against actual cisgendered women, which means you're actually born a woman, which this individual was born as, and also intersex women as well. well. And realistically, I don't think that, you know, it's as far as what people are trying to make it out to be.
As a woman, why don't you care about women's safety?
Because she is a woman. If it was another situation, she is a woman. It's not a transgender.
Why? How could she be a woman?
She doesn't fulfil the threshold of a female biological woman.
Be a woman. You can't be with an XY.
But she was born a woman.
She wasn't. She was born. You don't change your chromosomes.
And also, can I just make a really important point? So this whole thing about her having XY chromosomes was because she did. No, okay, but let me just make this point. The accusation of her having XY chromosomes hasn't actually been proven yet. This is something from a test that she was doing for the World Championships, which disqualified her, both for apparently having XY chromosomes and also for having high levels of testosterone. But without the proof, I actually think it's really dangerous to have somebody who is an Algerian woman, and let's be clear that in Algeria it's both illegal to be gay and transgender, and we're basically just weaponising this against this woman.
Okay.
If it's about testosterone as well.
She had a DNA test, and the DNA test showed that she...
But you have no proof of that, though.
This individual presents as a biological male. How would you feel about a sister of yours?
They don't present as a biological...
Yes, her physical manifestation, her biology is akin to a male, because she has XY chromosomes and high levels of testosterone and a very masculine physique as well. So here's a question I've got for you. How do you feel about a sister of yours or a female best friend facing someone that presents as a male in a boxing ring? Would you be comfortable with that?
But the thing is, she's not presenting...
that question.
She's not presenting as a male. That's what I'm saying to you.
She's not presenting as a female.
But she is. She's qualified...
Can't be female if you've got XY chromosomes. Do I have to play the Robert Winston tape over again?
She is a female. The International Olympic Committee have said that she's a female. She was born a female. Her documentation says that she's a female. If she was born as anything else, right, based on these XY chromosomes that apparently, let me just reiterate, we still don't have proof for, right? If she was born as if she was born as a male, then she would now be classified as a transgender female, and she hasn't.
John,
she's a woman.
Very unmasculine. And you just kept your
No, I just think
the rose between two thorns.
No, I think we need a bit of wisdom now, don't we?
Yeah, we waited.
I think we want a bit of wisdom. No, the key point seems to be extraordinary, that this gender test, we're not told what the details are. Now, Tony Blair had a very simple idea that, in fact, if you have a cervix, you're a woman. If you have a penis, you're a man. Now, people may think, oh, this is rather obvious, isn't it? But what's extraordinary is that this now seems strange, and other people then said, oh, yeah, no, we always thought that. And then we're suddenly in this world of the IOC world, which seems to be completely different. No, you have to have a gender test, and you have to have testosterone, then you have to have this, and you have that. You say, wait a moment, can we not go back to this very simple idea, is what is biologically a man and what is biologically a woman? Now, you can have arguments about gender and what people feel about it, and what they would like to be, how they would like to identify. But if you're talking about straightforward male-female characteristics, as Robert Winston, brilliant man, of course, points out, this is a test. It's one of the easiest tests in biology.
Joanna, briefly, if you can, is her opponent lying when she said, I've never been hit so hard in my life, and the match ended in less than 60 seconds?
I mean, maybe it's the hardest punch that she's ever had in her life, and maybe this individual from Algeria was the best opponent that she had. Like I was saying, this isn't something that is like unique to this person. I did say at the beginning of this, 7 in every 1,000 professional females have higher testosterone levels. If you've been through menopause, your testosterone levels spike up.
Well,
if you have PCOS, you spike.
Why aren't we given the details of the test?
But this is the thing, and I think it's dangerous.
Last point.
No, I'm sorry, I keep repeating, but we have been given details. DNA test is very simple. I don't understand why there's sort of any mystery about it.
Well, no, because they passed the gender test and they failed the gender test. People like me then think, wait a moment, can we just sort this bit out?
Briefly, Joanna, wouldn't you err on the side of caution? I mean, why are you taking a bullet for this individual if she may have killed that Italian boxer yesterday?
I wouldn't go that far. But...
I would absolutely go that far. If the fight ended in less than 60 seconds, I don't want to imagine how it would have gone over.
It was a horrible.
Can I just say?
It was a horrible horrible. The actual scene. Can we just go back to the actual scene, which most of us saw? 46 seconds. It was absolutely horrendous. You thought, here's this woman being punched in the face, and
if it was two men that were boxing and someone had a knockout, everybody, all of the boxing fans at home would be saying, "Wow, what a knockout! What an amazing athlete! What an amazing athlete!" Have you all wondered? Sorry, have you all wondered why? I don't know how old this woman is, but let's say she's 30 years old. Why her entire life, all of her documentation has said female. So, okay,
do you want to finish?
Have we wondered why all of her documentation throughout all of her life has said female?
Because
I guess she's had female...
She's from Algeria, which, as you said, if you're in fact gay or trans, you're in trouble. You'll be in prison. So, you know, if you say, what is the reason? Well, the most obvious conclusion from those a long way away from it is that she's thought, this is the only way I can live.
Competing for years in the women's category, and she's always been a woman until somebody has actual proof.
I don't think you're concerned about a fellow woman, a sister, in the ring.
Oh, don't play that game of a fellow sister.
I don't think you have a duty of care towards other women, potentially in the ring, facing someone that presents as a biological male. But as a woman, if that doesn't bother you, I'm quite concerned.
No, actually, do you know what would be of risk if actually it's about the testosterone levels? And if it was skyrocketing testosterone levels, but again, there are other women. There were other women. So what? But like, there are other women. But there are other women who also have a similar biological makeup in terms of testosterone.
They're not punching people. They're running. Or if you're running and you've got this testosterone,
you really should stop demonising this woman.
I'm in big trouble with Matthew.
If you're in a ring and
we've got to pay the bills.
Someone.
Can I say
Look, final point.
No, I mean, if you are an athlete and you're a runner, all right, then you'll win your race. But you're not actually.
All right, you lot tell every woman that has PCOS and menopause and higher testosterone levels that they're not really a woman and they shouldn't compete in certain sports.
They've got
crazy.
They've got XY chromosomes. Okay.
And what if they've got female genitalia?
Briefly, if you can, give me 10 seconds.
All right, okay, I can. Can I just say something? Can I say something? Honestly, you two, you really do get it. Women fighting each other in the boxing ring is nothing like this.
Yes, exactly.
As a poor, pathetic man, can I now enter this? Now, look, the point about it is, surely, is most of the sporting bodies around the world are sorting this out. They may have been slow, but they are now sorting it out. They're agreeing that, in fact, you can't have this position where men who are genuinely more powerful. So the IOC must sort themselves out, and to have a British spokesman speaking for them, I find embarrassing.
Well, there you go. Well, listen,
that's another point.
There you go. It shows all about opinions. What's yours? gbnews.com/your say. In a statement last night, the Paris 2024 Boxing Unit and International Olympic Committee have said, we've seen in reports misleading information about two female athletes competing at the Olympic Games. The two athletes have been competing in international boxing competitions for many years in the women's category, as I pointed out in my monologue, including the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020, IBA World Championships and IBA-sanctioned tournaments. The IOC is committed to protecting the human rights of all athletes participating in the Olympic Games. The IOC is saddened by the abuse that the two athletes are currently receiving. I think you'll find it was the Italian that was abused in the ring. But there you go. Coming up, Culture Secretary Nisa Nandi has a clear message for BBC fallen star Huw Edwards.
Huw Edwards ought to return the salary. I think having been arrested on such serious charges.
So, is Lisa Nandi right? The disgraced former face of BBC News, Huw Edwards, should return his bumper taxpayer-funded salary after admitting child abuse image charges. I'll be joined by a top TV executive about whether he'll do the right thing. But up next, as police prepare for more potential riots across the country this weekend, did Sir Keir Starmer strike the right tone in his address to the nation yesterday?
Response both to the immediate challenge, which is clearly driven by far-right hatred.
Far-right are a reaction to fear, to discomfort, to unease.
Or did he fail to properly address the legitimate concerns of the British people? We'll hear from both sides. Sparks will fly, kind of the mood of the show tonight. That's next.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Karen Stevenson was born in Stoke-on-Trent and read music at Trinity College, Cambridge. She's played cello with many of the world's great orchestras under the batons of some of the most renowned conductors, and she joins me now to discuss her career and the importance of music in education. Tell me about that. What is your role at the Philharmonia?
My role at the Philharmonia is number 2 cello. I've been there for about 15 years. Sometimes I play number 1 cello as well, which is a great opportunity for me.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I often think what a very difficult life it is to be a professional musician.
I make a living out of it. It is definitely possible. Yeah, we don't really like it when we get into a taxi and someone says, "What's your day job?" Because we work really hard.
I was kind of making the opposite point. Not that you'd also have a day job. I think the perfection that is required for a professional musician is extraordinary. On the whole, we are intolerant of mistakes in classical music.
Yes, we are.
And I just wondered whether you don't become very frustrated with a world in which everything else is imperfect.
You are only as good as your last concert, Michael. That's how it feels. It is a lot of pressure. Sometimes we will say, OK, a pint for every wrong note or something, but depending on the piece of music, that could be quite dangerous.
How many hours a day do you have to practice?
You have to practice much more when you're younger, I think, when you're learning. I think this is really important. And when you're at music college. I'm a busy, I'm travelling, I have a family. I can't practice as much as I used to, so you have to rely on your experience. What I really wanted to say is that there's been a lot of fear-mongering about classical music being in decline and it not being relevant, and I really wanted to say that I don't think that's the case. Our audiences have increased. They're the highest they've been in 10 years.
The People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets and my take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Coming up, should Huw Edwards return the £200,000 salary he was paid after his arrest? But has Sir Keir Starmer failed to properly address the concerns of the British people? It's time for our head-to-head. So the PM yesterday told any potential rioters that the authorities will be watching you. However, despite the warnings, it seems a weekend of planned protests have begun across the UK. In Sunderland tonight, there was a standoff between police and protesters outside a mosque where officers had stones and beer cans thrown at them. There are continued reports that an overturned car has been set on fire, while police in riot gear have come under sustained attack as rioters set off fire extinguishers against them. In his Downing Street press conference, Sir Keir Starmer raged at far-right plotters, which he said were moving from community to community. But Reform UK leader Nigel Farage claimed that Starmer is blind to a bigger issue at play.
No, the far right are a reaction to fear, to discomfort, to unease that is out there shared by tens of millions of people. Let me be clear. I don't support street violence. I don't support thuggery in any way at all. But I'm worried, not just about the events in Southport, but about societal decline that is happening in our country.
So did Sir Keir Starmer fail to properly address British people's concerns? Let me know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say, or tweet us at GBNews and do vote in the poll. Going head-to-head tonight are former police sergeant Harry Tanguy and director of the Sanctuary Foundation, Dr. Krish Kandiah. Dr. Kandiah, thank you so much for joining us. Do you think that Sir Keir Starmer, the new Prime Minister, struck the right tone? Was he right to mention the far right and extremists?
I think he did strike the right tone. I think the main thing he did was to support the police, who have been incredibly brave. First of all, they were the ones that stopped the terrible attack that killed these 3 beautiful children. And then very quickly, they had to defend themselves from being attacked by a gang. I think thugs is the word that's been used, hooligans. They've been attacking hundreds of police officers around the country. And what the Prime Minister said is he wanted the police forces to work more closely together. That makes a lot of sense to me. He's also said that he's going to go after the disinformation that's been spread online. And some of our well-known MPs who have spoken up for the far right have actually been retweeting wrong information.
Dr. Kandiah, who are those MPs that have spoken up for the far right?
Well, you just played a little clip where you had Nigel Farage defending the far right.
When did he defend? When has he ever defended the far right? He finds the far right despicable. He is a mainstream politician. He's the leader of a political party that's just earned 4.1 million votes at their general election.
He just gave an explanation for why he has sympathy with them.
Well, do you think, Dr. Kandiah, that people are right to be angry about illegal immigration or current levels of legal net migration?
I think what we're all right to be angry about is that 3 children were killed, and blaming Muslims by attacking mosques is completely an exploitation of that horrible event.
Absolutely,
That's what we should be angry about.
Absolutely. You're quite right on that one. Harry Tanguy, what do you think about this story and about Sir Keir Starmer's position on the riots?
Oh, he let a good chance go, didn't he, really? I don't think he's helped the police at all. I think he's been part of the major problem, because what he's said is that this whole thing is all about yobs and thuggery, and there's no message behind it. They just want to demolish towns and throw bricks at cops. Now, let's get this straight, first of all. I was in the police for 30 years. These are my friends and colleagues. Don't throw bricks at my cops. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm very fond of them. It is not them who makes the decisions. It's the politicians and it's their bosses. And if you think there's 2-tier policing, it's not the frontline cops that make those decisions. Leave them alone. They're just normal family men and women, many of which probably have sympathies with you. Now, we've got 750,000 of net immigration into this country every year from the Tories, and Labour seem to be, according to those masses out there, relaxing the whole thing of this. Now, if you have a lot more unvetted young men in the country from different cultures, I think everyone must agree, statistically speaking, you're going to get a lot more crime because they're not all vetted, so you don't know who they are. And they drive past, these plumbers and electricians drive past huge hotels with people. I've done it myself, and they're in new tracksuits, mobile phones, they're all men. And they think, well, I'm paying for those and I can't heat the house. I can't put food on the table. And so they're turning to the mainstream media. Forget it. No impartiality whatsoever. They're told they're far right. They're turning to the government and they're voting. And they see the voting system is completely unfair. They see this 2-tier policing because the bosses and the politicians are too afraid to deal with people who are a different colour. Look, let me make this clear. My girlfriend, who is the sweetest, lovely, most gentle person in the world, is a Muslim. She's Arab Muslim. And I'm thinking, you've got to listen to the bigger picture out there. This thuggery is the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of people who aren't into violence. They don't want to go on these violent marches, but you will always get the tip that shines through. But the message is still there, and he ignored it.
Indeed, and I think you didn't answer my question, Dr. Kandiah. I asked you whether it was reasonable for people to be angry about illegal immigration, which is currently costing the country £8 million a day in accommodation costs alone, and legal net migration of 700,000 in a year. That's a town about the size of Leeds annually. Are people right, and is it understandable, or at least, that they're angry about it?
Look, I'm up for a grown-up conversation about immigration.
Second time you haven't answered my question.
I'm up for that conversation. But look, these riots are in response to a dreadful attack in Southport. That should be the centre of this
just a catalyst.
conversation.
It's just,
and look, I
it's
want to
just a
say,
catalyst.
Harry, I'm so grateful for your service as a police officer. And I'm seeing brave police officers get caught in the middle of it.
Okay.
The families of the victims do not want this violence. They are not being honoured. These 3 girls that have been killed, they are not being honoured by this. In fact, the other children who were from that community are more scared by the riots than the attack.
And on that, we can agree. Dr. Candia, thank you so much for joining us. A fascinating conversation. That is Dr. Krish Candia, the director of the Sanctuary Foundation, and former police sergeant Harry Tanguy. A fascinating debate. Of course, opinions split on this, but what do you think? Well, 91% of you agree that the Prime Minister did not address the British people's concerns. 9% disagree. Coming up, the enhanced games or doping Olympics hopes that its juiced-up athletes will smash Usain Bolt's record when it launches next year. But is it just a dangerous gimmick? Former British Olympian Mara Yamauchi weighs in on that and the woke Olympic gender boxing madness soon. But next, Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy has a clear message for Huw Edwards.
Huw Edwards ought to return the salary, I think, having been arrested on such serious charges.
Should he hand back the money? I'll be speaking to a top TV executive next.
Good evening. Here's your GB News weather from the Met Office. It is going to be relatively warm, not as hot as it has been, but warm and sunny at times through much of this weekend, though there will be some rain pushing through. Initially, we have a front making its way southeastwards through this evening and overnight. That's already brought quite a bit of rain across Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it's now clearing these areas, and so here it is going to turn mostly dry overnight with some clear skies. For England and Wales, though, turning increasingly cloudy, and there will be some outbreaks of rain around. Where we have the cloud, temperatures aren't going to drop much. Another warm night to come, but quite a bit fresher across Scotland and Northern Ireland, dropping into single figures, particularly in more rural spots. But first thing tomorrow, across many parts of England and Wales, it is going to be a bit grey initially. There will be some outbreaks of rain around, and worth bearing in mind, some of the rain could be a little bit heavy at times. A bit brighter first thing across North Wales and much of northern England, though some cloud here and there. A brighter start for Scotland and Northern Ireland, just a couple of showers starting to feed their way in from the west as we go through the morning. Eastern Scotland getting off to a lovely fine start to the day with plenty of sunshine here. Those showers, though, across western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland will become more widespread here as we go through the afternoon, and some heavy ones are quite likely. Meanwhile, across the southern southeastern parts of England, here we will have some bursts of rain through the day, and these could be heavy at times before they clear away later. Elsewhere, a good deal of dry, bright and sunny weather, and with temperatures, albeit not as high as they have been, getting into the mid-20s, it will feel warm in any sunshine. Sunday should get off to a fairly fine start, albeit a fresher start than of late for many of us, before some wetter weather starts to push its way in from the northwest, and this is likely to bring some heavy rain as we go into the beginning of next week, so do watch out for some high rainfall totals, particularly across northern and western parts. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m, followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain, followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one
will be cancelled. Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, breaking tonight. This just in. The teen at the centre of the Sex Pics scandal that led to Huw Edwards' downfall has spoken publicly for the first time to the Daily Mirror newspaper. The man, whose gender we can now reveal, aged 21, but who was a vulnerable teenager when Edwards first asked him for explicit photos and messages, has said the following. Speaking exclusively to the paper, he said, "I've stayed silent for so long to protect Huw, but I feel sick at what has happened." The man who wishes to remain anonymous says he feels like Huw Edwards has groomed him. Now, extraordinarily, Huw Edwards is likely to keep his rumoured £300,000 gold-plated pension funded by taxpayers and those forced to fork out almost £170 a year in the licence fee. That's in addition to the £200,000 salary he picked up after he was arrested in November for accessing indecent images of children. Here is the Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy's view.
Huw Edwards ought to return the salary. I think having been arrested on such serious charges all the way back in November, to continue to receive that salary all the way through until he resigned is wrong and is not a good use of taxpayers' money. I think most people in the country would agree with that, but obviously whether he does that or not is up to him.
Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me now is former chief executive of Channel 5 and an ex-producer at the BBC, David Elstein. David, first of all, your first reaction to this breaking news that the alleged vulnerable youngster referred to in those original set of allegations a year ago against Huw Edwards has spoken out.
Well, it was always a matter of time before that was going to happen. And it just reminds us that the BBC was already on notice all the way back to the whole Sun story, that there was a real problem with Huw Edwards. And they were also getting internal complaints about his behaviour. So it makes it all the more inexplicable that when Tim Davie, the Director General, and Debbie Furness, the Chief Executive of BBC News, were told the nature of the accusations against Huw Edwards back in November, but they did nothing about it. They didn't call him in and say, what's going on? What have you done? What are the charges you're going to face? How are you going to plead? Are you planning to resign now, or do I need to fire you? That's what should have happened back in November. It's a complete red herring for Lisa Nandy now to say that Huw Edwards should give the money back. I mean, she's completely missing the point. This was the responsibility of BBC management. And yet again, they failed to get to grips with a problem involving senior talent working within the BBC. And we've had 5 or 6 examples of that over the last 10 to 12 years. We've had inquiries into Jimmy Savile, inquiries into Stuart Hall, and there's an inquiry into the Tim Westwood affair that's cost £3 million and is still sitting inside the BBC. They haven't published it, they haven't done anything about it. The BBC seems to be culturally incapable of making firm decisions in the interest of the licence fee payer.
Well, is it behaving like the Roman Catholic Church, circling the wagons and protecting its own?
Well, there is an element of, and we saw this with the Martin Bashir affair, where the senior executives protected him, not least to protect themselves. And I guess psychologically, they kind of imagine themselves as counterparts of their top presenters and therefore identify with them and won't intervene when they need to. But for it to happen 5 times in a row, and still they don't learn the lesson, is really remarkable.
And of course, Newsnight were forced by the BBC management to pull an expose of Jimmy Savile because it coincided with the great celebrations of his career. There are definite unfortunate historic echoes of this story, David, but let's hear from the Director General. Here's what he had to say.
when someone is arrested, there's no charges. Also, another factor at this point was very significant duty of care considerations. I think it was right for us to say, look, we'll let the police do their business, and then when charges happen, we will act.
David, briefly, if you can, should Huw Edwards pay a financial price for his crimes? There is a rumoured £300,000 a year gold-plated pension and the small matter of 200 grand he earned after he was suspended.
His pension goes back 40 years. You don't hand back your entire, whatever it's for, £4 million pension pot because you've now resigned from the BBC and indeed should have been fired. The 200,000 is entirely down to Tim Davie. It's nothing to do with Huw Edwards. Tim Davie should have taken the decision when he did. He failed to do so. When he talks about there hadn't been charges, he was told what the charges were going to be and that they were extremely serious. He chose to do nothing. Yet when Cliff Richard was suspected by South Yorkshire police of some ancient child abuse crime, the BBC, long before he was charged, because he was never charged, hired a helicopter to film his apartment whilst the South Yorkshire police executed the search warrant. Honestly, the hypocrisy is dismaying, and the incompetence is also really upsetting. If I were a licence fee payer, and I am, I'd be pretty cheesed off with the way the BBC management has handled this. It's not Hugh's fault that he was paid the 200,000. It can't be his fault that he's got a pension. The BBC management is acting on our behalf. Let them do so.
David, deeply grateful for your time. Former chief executive of Channel 5 Television and former top producer at the BBC, who is raging about the management's handling of that situation. Coming up, remember when Prince Harry said this just 2 weeks ago?
One of the reasons why I won't bring my wife back to this country.
Yes, indeed, but he's happy taking Meghan to crime-ridden Colombia, which has one of the highest murder rates in the world. I'll be tackling the Duke and Duchess of double standards at 10 o'clock. You won't want to miss it. But next, the enhanced Olympic Games. Athletes, full of all the hormones you can think of, competing to a top level. Will that work? Find out next.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, to enrich us on the best cheeses and wine to buy, I'm delighted to be joined by the CEO of Inflorescence, Jacinta Madison Wilson. Jacinta, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you so much for having me.
Also, thank you so much for bringing what is
what a Sunday you're having.
of wonderful... What do we have before us?
So, we've got 3 gorgeous wines to try today. We've got an English sparkling, we've got a beautiful rosé and a dessert wine, and, of course, cheese.
Wonderful.
And paired them all beautifully.
Now, English sparkling wine has had a bit of a renaissance.
Oh, it's incredible, isn't it?
To use a French word to describe English sparkling wine. It's having a bit of a moment in the sun.
Absolutely. I just think it's so exciting that this is right on our doorstep, essentially, an hour out of London, and we're around beautiful vineyards.
The chalk sort of sediment is exactly the same as the Champagne region of France.
Yeah, our soils are really similar. We use the same grape varieties a lot of the time. We make it in exactly the same way as Champagne. Our climate is like Champagne was 40 to 50 years ago. So we're really kind of drinking it blind. You almost wouldn't know that you're not drinking champagne. But it's right here on our doorstep. We can stay local now.
Absolutely marvellous. Well, we've got... So what is the best order to start?
OK, well, we're going to start with sparkling, because all things in life should start with sparkling. I got married a month ago, and this was actually the... Thank you so much. This was the wine I chose to have as our first wine that we served the guests. This is from a winery called Bluebell, which is in Sussex, and I've chosen to pair this with a lovely... kind kind of the English version of Camembert, which is called Tunworth. It's a very classic pairing of champagne and brie. So we're kind of going to do the English version of that now.
Classic.
Absolutely. Are you ready to get stuck in?
I am so...
OK.
Hang on. Is it cheese first or wine first?
I'd have a little sip of the wine first.
Sip of the wine,
have a little bite of the cheese and then some more wine. Get it all mixed up in there.
It's like a cheese sandwich.
Exactly. Yes.
OK, here
Cheers.
we go. Cheers.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Harry and Meghan's wild double standards. You won't want to miss it at 10. But welcome back. No Olympic Games passes without a good dose of doping controversy. Today, Australian coach Brett Hawke said Chinese swimmer Pan Zhanlei's world record win in Paris was not humanly possible as China's athletes come under scrutiny for alleged doping. Well, what if all the athletes were superhuman themselves, juiced up to their eyeballs with as many chemicals as they wanted? That is the dream for the Enhanced Games, which plans its first edition next year, where there will be no drug testing. It will be a pharmaceutical free-for-all, a bit like the GB News Christmas party, with participants free to pump, juice and dope however they see fit. Plenty say it shouldn't happen, but its founder, Aaron D'Souza, argues the Games are doing something truly extraordinary that is shaping the future. Well, to discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome an incredible athlete in her own right, former British Olympian, Mara Yamalchi. Mara, thank you so much for joining us. What do you think about the idea of an Olympics where you can take as many medications as you like?
I think it's a nonsense idea, and to be honest, I'm not sure it's even going to go ahead. I mean, one of the reasons why the anti-doping system exists is because doping is unsafe. It's dangerous for athlete health. It's not only about fairness. And the Enhanced Games are claiming that this is going to be the safest competition ever. Well, it won't be if athletes are doping. That's really dangerous.
It'll be the fastest, though, won't it? And great entertainment.
Well, we don't know. I mean, you know, you can't just dope on the day of a competition. The effects of doping you have to do over a period of time. And, you know, I can't see any of the world's best athletes, or very few, signing up for it, because if they go there and dope, they won't be able to return to their sports. They'll be serving bans for breaking the doping rules.
Isn't it more honest, given that so much doping already happens?
No, I don't think it's honest. I think we have to stick with the system we have, and I mean the answer to that is that the anti-doping authorities need to clamp down more. Yeah. In my own event, the marathon, the women's marathon, you know, doping is a very serious problem, and the national and global anti-doping authorities just need to clamp down on it.
Well, I think you win the argument with the principle of the health and the safety of the athletes involved. Of course, this doping is absolutely disastrous for the body. It's a big experiment, could cause cancer, could shorten your life. I absolutely agree. Let's hear, though, from the founder of the Enhanced Games, Aaron D'Souza, who says we're doing something truly extraordinary, something that's shaping the future. Bodily autonomy is a fundamental human right. Adults with free, informed consent should be able to do with their body what they wish. Individuals should be able to make risk decisions for themselves. Now, Mara, before we go, can I just ask you about your thoughts on a boxer who presents as a biological male fighting a woman in the ring?
So this isn't about presenting. Two boxers in the Paris Olympics in the women's category have twice failed sex tests. They were shown in those tests to have XY, as in male chromosomes. My view is it's very dangerous and unfair. The IOC are allowing it. Their criteria for inclusion in the female category appears to only be female in your passport. They have no rules about having a male body. So it's very serious, and I think the IOC have completely brought the games and boxing into disrepute by allowing males into the female category.
Why do you think the IOC have allowed this to happen?
I think they've been captured by extreme gender identity ideology. I mean, they produced this document last November, a framework in which they said there's no presumption of advantage. Well, the entire history of sport tells us that males have advantages over females. This is very clear in all sports. So I think they've been captured by this ideology and they need to get back to reality. They need to listen to scientists like Dr. Emma Hilton, Dr. Ross Tucker, and others who know all this stuff inside out. They need to get away from ideology, and most importantly, they need to restore fair and safe sport for females. This is very misogynistic, to be honest.
Does this feel like a tipping point to you?
I hope it will be. I mean, the scenes we saw Angela Carini, the Italian boxer, yesterday, collapsing in tears on the mat after facing a male in the ring. This has become global news. People are horrified by it, totally understandably. And I hope it will be the breaking point for this awful ideology, and that the IOC will change course and return to sex testing and fairness for female athletes.
Let me say it's been the deepest privilege to have you on the show. My profound thanks to British Olympian Mara Yamauchi. Thank you, Mara. Bold and brave words, and I think important words. Of course, there is a flip side to this. Many would argue that the IOC simply want to accommodate people who identify by a different gender. I know it's complex. There is a grey area regarding this person's biology, but my last guest there, Mara Yamauchi, very clear that particular boxer is a biological male. Why are we even debating this? It's strange, isn't it? Because the woke were telling us during the pandemic to follow the science. Now they've given it up. Anyway, Harry and Meghan are back. I'll be dealing with them in no uncertain terms. They won't come to Britain because it's dangerous, so they're off to Colombia. Make it make sense.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your GB News weather from the Met Office. It is going to be relatively warm, not as hot as it has been, but warm and sunny at times through much of this weekend, though there will be some rain pushing through. Initially, we have a front making its way southeastwards through this evening and overnight. That's already brought quite a bit of rain across Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it's now clearing these areas, and so here it is going to turn mostly dry overnight with some clear skies. For England and Wales, though, turning increasingly cloudy, and there will be some outbreaks of rain around. Where we have the cloud, temperatures aren't going to drop much. Another warm night to come, but quite a bit fresher across Scotland and Northern Ireland, dropping into single figures, particularly in more rural spots. But first thing tomorrow, across many parts of England and Wales, it is going to be a bit grey initially. There will be some outbreaks of rain around, and worth bearing in mind, some of the rain could be a little bit heavy at times. A bit brighter first thing across North Wales and much of northern England, though some cloud here and there. A brighter start for Scotland and Northern Ireland, just a couple of showers starting to feed their way in from the west as we go through the morning. Eastern Scotland getting off to a lovely fine start to the day with plenty of sunshine here. Those showers, though, across western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland will become more widespread here as we go through the afternoon, and some heavy ones are quite likely. Meanwhile, across the southern southeastern parts of England, here we will have some bursts of rain through the day, and these could be heavy at times before they clear away later. Elsewhere, a good deal of dry, bright and sunny weather, and with temperatures, albeit not as high as they have been, getting into the mid-20s, it will feel warm in any sunshine. Sunday should get off to a fairly fine start, albeit a fresher start than of late for many of us, before some wetter weather starts to push its way in from the northwest, and this is likely to bring some heavy rain as we go into the beginning of next week, so do watch out for some high rainfall totals, particularly across northern and western parts. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could become the next big Great British Giveaway winner, with your chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. Listen to what some of our previous winners have to say about winning big with us.
On the day that I got
the money in the bank account, everything just seemed a lot sunnier.
But I do have something to spend it on.
Just go for it. It's an absolute must.
Thank you, GBNews.
Amazing feeling to win.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it is 10 o'clock. This is Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Mark Dolan. And breaking whilst we're on air, images online this evening are showing a fire at the Sunderland Central Police Office as violent protests continue in the city. Has this new Labour government and our new Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, lost control of the streets? Starmer spoke about the far right. There are community tensions. Is law and order falling apart in this country? I'll get a full reaction from tonight's top pundits. Also this evening.
We broke our promise to the British public to deliver controlled and reduced migration.
So is Robert Jenrick the man to save the Tories from oblivion? I'll be sitting down with former Conservative Minister Paul Scully shortly. Paul Scully, plus this.
There's not that much I can say, but I'm nothing like I was.
This is an incredible story. I'll be meeting the woman who developed a Swedish accent despite never visiting the country. She wants to raise awareness of foreign accent syndrome. And as always, tomorrow's front pages with full pundit reaction. Tonight, top journalist and author Harriet Sargent, TV news legend John Sargent, and entrepreneur and social commentator Joanna Jarju. And Creepy Joe strikes again.
Remember, no serious guys till you're 30. God love you.
Absolutely. There are no words. The girl was 13. A busy hour. Let's get to work. Disorder on the streets of Britain. That's next.
Mark, thank you very much and good evening to you. It's just after 10 o'clock and we'll start then with a recap of that breaking news Mark mentioned there, that a police station has been set on fire in Sunderland as a weekend of planned protests appear to have begun across the UK. These are the latest pictures from the scene of that blaze in the centre of the city, with reports also of at least 2 other vehicles also being overturned and set on fire as rioters have clashed with police officers tonight. If you're watching on television, you can see here one of those overturned cars set ablaze. And earlier, police in riot gear also came under sustained attack as protesters set off fire extinguishers and threw rocks and bottles. You can just make out there in those pictures the scenes of that attack against riot police, covering themselves and shielding from the violence. Earlier, up to 200 people were heard shouting anti-Islamic chants as well as mounted police and officers in vans took to the roads to traffic and keep the police. Those rallies seem to have stemmed from misinformation online about the suspect of a stabbing spree on Monday in Southport. Any more details throughout this evening we will, of course, bring to you here on GB News. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has visited Southport for the second time this week to announce a package of support for the town. During his visit there this week, Sir Keir Starmer praised the town's resilience and announced a mental health support and event to bolster local cohesion. Meanwhile, in London, Downing Street has joined with landmarks across the northwest. It lit up in pink and will do over the weekend too, in memory of the young girls killed in the Southport knife attack. 9-year-old Alice de Silva Aguirre, 6-year-old Bebe King and 7-year-old Elsie Dot Stankham were killed when a knife man attacked them on Monday. 8 other children were also injured, along with 2 adults. Turning to other news now, a mural of former newsreader Huw Edwards in his home village of Carmarthenshire has been removed. The artwork has now been painted over, while institutions including Bangor and Cardiff universities are reviewing their ties with the ex-presenter. That's after he admitted accessing indecent images of children. The Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, is calling on the BBC to reclaim £200,000 of salary Mr Edwards received between his arrest in November and his resignation in April. Prisoners who've been released as part of an exchange between Russia and the West have spoken of their burden that others are still in jail. It was the biggest exchange of prisoners since the Cold War and included dual Russian-British citizen Vladimir Kara-Murza. He was detained following opposition of the invasion in Ukraine. In exchange, 8 Russian prisoners were freed, including an assassin who was serving life in Germany. Well, here, meanwhile, 96 migrants are suing the UK government, claiming they were badly treated at the Manston Processing Centre in Kent. Their lawyers claim the group were unlawfully detained between September and November of 2022, with allegations including a lack of access to hygiene products, forced removal of hijabs and reportedly inadequate conditions for children and pregnant women. The Home Office, though, haven't yet filed a defence. And finally, potentially some lighter news, but perhaps not if you're a fan of crumpets. They've been removed from supermarket shelves because reports they may contain pieces of metal. The Food Standards Agency says certain batches of Morrison's crumpets, with a best before date of either the 6th or 7th of August, could be unsafe to eat. And the warning also applies to the Hovis brand with those same dates. Slightly concerning for Mark Dolan. I've seen him sneak a packet just now. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. More at 11 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Well, a grave start to the hour. Breaking news. Images online this evening are showing a fire at the Sunderland Central Police Office as violent protests continue in the city. Now, these are the latest pictures from the scene of the blaze, with reports of at least 2 vehicles also being overturned and set fire to, as rioters have clashed with officers. Earlier this evening, there was a standoff between police and protesters outside a mosque, where officers had stones and beer cans thrown at them. Now, police in riot gear have come under sustained attack as rioters set off fire extinguishers against them. This is a developing situation. Members of the crowd are reported to have chanted in support of far-right activist Tommy Robinson, whilst others shouted insults about Islam. Now, this, of course, is a point previously made by the Prime Minister Keir Starmer about far-right agitators travelling to certain places in order to cause trouble, including Southport, of course, in the aftermath of the horrific murder of 3 little girls. Cars in the city centre, as I mentioned, have been targeted by the group. Mounted officers pushed back demonstrators, some of whom were in masks, and locals in Sunderland have been told to stay out of the city centre. North East Mayor Kim McGuinness has spoken out. She said she was appalled by the scenes in Sunderland. Make no mistake, she said, if your response to tragedy is to use it to commit violence, to abuse others, attack the police and damage property, you stand for nothing except thuggery. She goes on, you don't speak for Sunderland, you don't speak for this region. A cinema in Sunderland, the Omniplex, was also forced to close during the evening in the interest of public and staff safety. Look, this is a developing situation. Here are pictures of scenes of absolute carnage at this police station, razed to the ground, and symptomatic of what we've seen elsewhere in the country in the aftermath of that attack on 3 innocent girls in Southport. With me this evening, I've got journalist and author Harriet Sargent, former BBC chief political correspondent John Sargent, and entrepreneur and social commentator Joanna Jarju. Joanna, a nasty pattern is emerging here, isn't it?
Yeah, a really nasty pattern. And unfortunately, you know, this is one of the terrible things, really, about the development of social media, that misinformation spreads so widely. And I know that a lot of people will say, misinformation, what are you talking about? People are protesting about X, Y and Z. But when we look at the protests earlier on in the week in Southport, that was triggered a lot by misinformation. And there would have been people, a chunk of people there who were protesting because they were just outraged and hurt and, I guess, expressing their grief in a different way. And there were other people who were there for a very specific reason that weren't even from Southport. And this is earlier on in the week, that were targeting things like mosques, for example, that had to be rebuilt. And then now you've got in another area in the country, people just, and this is what I don't understand every single time that people riot like this. The country that you love so much and the country that you want to defend, you're now burning down a police station. It makes no sense. You wake up the next day and then it's the people, the decent people in Sunderland from that community, that then have to go and volunteer and clean up while you guys then probably sleep off your hangovers from the night before.
John, far-right activists or ordinary people worried about what they feel is a broken country?
No, I think I rather agree with Joanna very much that for the people in the areas, this happened in Sheffield too, the moment they were interviewed, they said, look, this is our area that's being wrecked. These are things that we depend upon. That bus in flames is our bus, which we're going to lose. So there is a clear difference between the interests of the people in the area who know what's going to happen, which means that they will suffer more, not less. They don't believe in a revolution or taking over a government. They just think, what about our area that's being wrecked? The outside agitators, therefore, quite reasonably, from the government's point of view, are the main source of interest. Can we stop them going around the country? Because, of course, they have no interest at all, particularly in the locals. They want the agitation. They are professional agitators, and they have a wonderful way of communicating on the social media. Very easy for them to say, Sunderland's the next place, let's go there, let's wreck them.
Harriet Sargent, I mean, clearly there are people that have travelled to cause trouble. We condemn them in the highest order, but is it wrong to tar everyone that's concerned about our society with the same brush?
Yes, I do think so, and I think this is part of something far more fundamental that has expressed itself in a way that none of us approve of or want, but which is of deep feeling that has tried to, through the ballot box, to get its way. And each time, I mean, you had Brexit, you had the Conservatives given a vast majority to control immigration. And what happened every time those, I feel, legitimate fears were just ignored and immigration was put on steroids. And people have tried and have not been listened to and are now really angry. And I felt that Keir Starmer, I'm afraid, has only stoked this. I felt that the speech he gave a few days ago did not calm things down. He should have made clear that we are all in front of the law, we are equal, and that we all have to obey the law. But that is not the message that has come over. I mean, I, for example, happen to live near Edgware Road, and for the last 9 months, every Saturday, we have had cavalcades of cars. We've had people been shouting and chanting, screaming anti-Semitic abuse.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It has been deeply... I'm sorry.
Wait a minute. Are you dismissing calls for intifada, which means suicide bombers on buses and on trains?
This is my street.
Yeah, but Harriet, you
that this has
No,
been
let Harriet
happening.
finish.
No,
Let
I
Harriet
do
had a
want to finish,
tremendous...
because-
She spoke for
Yeah,
5
but
minutes.
this is what's...
Harriet, finish your point.
Harriet has gone on and on.
Can I say that I think you're both doing what the media and political elite are doing, which is ignoring the concerns of ordinary people.
No,
Finish
I
your
would like
point.
to finish, because this has been said over and over again at all these things, that there's two-tier policing. This keeps on being brought up, and it's a deep sense of unfairness. And I have seen this every week.
Joanna, how can you chuckle about the so-called peace marches in which hateful anti-Jewish slogans have gone unacknowledged by the police and not dealt with?
Listen,
how can you chuckle about that?
The reason why I'm sorry. Let me actually clarify what I was chuckling at. I was chuckling at the irony of what was happening, of what Harriet was just saying. Given the scenes that everybody is watching right now, I am not saying that I don't condemn anybody who is, as much as I condemn anybody who has anti-Islamophobic chants, which is what we're seeing here as well in Sunderland, other places around the country, and also in the pro-Palestine protests as well, equally. But what I'm saying is that it's crazy that you're even kind of bringing that as some sort of like equivalence to what the scenes that we're seeing right now. That's not to say that people chanting anti-Semitic stuff in those protests. But why are you even bringing it to this level?
Finish your point and then back to Harriet.
Why are you even bringing it to this level? Like, it wasn't good enough. And let's actually be let's clarify that those chants and the people who were saying anti-Semitic stuff were literally few and far between, right? You are literally seeing.
Was it projection of river to the sea?
I see
Wait a moment.
Nobody else is allowed to speak.
Okay, John, sorry.
Can I ask one question when I rant on? But I mean, are you suggesting the Sunderland trouble is anti-Semitic? For goodness sake.
No, she's not saying that.
You're going on and on about all sorts of other issues. This is quite clear. What's interesting is that the Prime Minister made it quite clear in his speech that there was a danger of more trouble because of people coming from outside. The Prime Minister is then condemned. Why? I don't know. He made a clear warning, said it's very important for the police to act against these outside agitators. We've got to have a special squad. We've got to be able to photograph people. We've got to make sure that they can cross police boundaries. Why? Because there may be trouble. Now there is trouble.
One at a time, because let me tell you, we can go live to Downing Street now, and in contrast from the scenes of carnage, fire and disorder in Sunderland, to calm in Downing Street and a pink glow, and that's in tribute to the awful attack on Monday in Southport and the 3 little girls who lost their lives, who were murdered in cold blood attending a dance class. So that's Downing Street live. If you're just joining us, scenes of disorder and chaos in Sunderland, sadly symptomatic of what we've seen earlier in the week. And you can see fire officers there trying to deal with this enormous inferno. I mean, essentially, the police station has been razed to the ground, a major public hazard, reports of cars being overturned. This clearly the first major political headache for our new Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. We're going to get reaction to that from former Conservative MP and Minister Paul Scully, plus his thoughts on who should replace Rishi Sunak as leader of the Conservatives. But chaos on Britain's streets. That's next.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. every day from 6 a.m.
A new report suggests that Prince Harry is lonely in California and he's considering returning to Britain despite a seismic falling out with his father and his brother.
But the question we're asking this morning is whether Meghan would come with her Prince Charming or whether Harry would perhaps be more welcome here if he came solo.
Like Kinsey, we'll go to Kinsey Schofield live now in LA. Kinsey, we've got lots of time to talk about this and speculate this. We've got about 6 minutes or so to talk. But what's behind all of this? Where are these thoughts coming from?
They're coming from royal author Huw Vickers, and I don't know if you're familiar with Mr. Vickers, but he's written over 30 books about the British royal family. And he told The Sun that Prince Harry will ultimately return to the UK with his tail between his legs. He described the Duke of Sussex as angry and says Harry is genuinely petrified of losing his wife, Meghan Markle. When asked his predictions for where Harry and Meghan will be in the next 20 years, Vickers told The Sun, I think he'll come home, explaining, I think Harry will come home, and if he comes home, we must be very nice to him because he won't particularly want to. He's quite angry, suggesting that he would be coming home solo. Vickers also said that Prince Harry looks slightly petrified of Meghan Markle and that King Charles has left the door wide open for Harry's return if and when he does decide to come back.
I can only imagine the culture shock that Prince Harry has faced arriving there. This is a kid that has grown up in castles.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you're just joining us, breaking news this evening. Images online are showing a major fire at the Sunderland Central Police Office as violent protests continue in the city. These are the latest devastating pictures from the scene of the blaze, with reports of at least 2 vehicles overturned and set on fire as rioters have clashed with officers in worrying parallels with what happened in Southport on Tuesday in the aftermath of the murder of 3 little girls at a dance class at the start of the week. Earlier this evening, there was a standoff between police and protesters outside a mosque where officers had stones and beer cans thrown at them. Police in riot gear have come under sustained attack as rioters set off fire extinguishers against them. Well, let's get more reaction to this very worrying and developing story. We're joined by former Conservative MP and Government Minister Paul Scully. Paul, these are troubling scenes. What's your first reaction on that?
Good evening, Mark. And yeah, it really is troubling, as you say. It's something that I'm just fresh to and been catching up as I've been waiting to come on this evening. And it's absolutely horrendous because there's such a detachment from what is going on in Westminster, what is going on here in Sunderland, in Hartlepool before, outside Downing Street, and as you say, in Southport, where it seemed in Southport that people were coming out because they were describing it as because of what happened in the stabbings. But then there were people that were fueled with alcohol that were, clearly being agitated by social media and by other people. And so it's going to be a lot of investigation that's going to need to be done. What is stirring this up in the here and now and what we can do to quell it.
Indeed. Clearly there is a very nasty and malignant far-right element, people who want trouble, who are travelling to these areas to hijack what ultimately, certainly relating to Monday, was a tragedy. There is also the genuine concern of ordinary Brits about illegal immigration and quite unsustainable, in many people's view, levels of legal net migration. Is it wrong to conflate the two? Is it either or? What's behind this anger and this chaos?
I mean, if you look in past history, I remember the Croydon riots, the Tottenham riots, Croydon riots, and other parts of the country back in, I think it's 2011, and it happened at a similar time of year. It was a hot summer. I remember travelling back from holiday to find, not far from Croydon, a load of shops being looted at that time. It seemed to be a couple of events that then really inflamed tension around the country in particular communities. So I think there's a lot of things going on here. I don't think you can conflate the two, but one thing, that Southport tragedy seemed to have, brought people out because of the agitation around social media and some of the fake information that was going out, that has then led to tensions on other issues, as you say, about migration, people shouting, I want my country back. Clearly, this is not the country we want back. So they don't represent normal people that are really concerned about migration, that want to tackle both illegal and legal migration to make sure we can control it properly.
Indeed. Look, you have to condemn this violence, this disorder wholeheartedly. Tens of police officers were badly injured in Southport. There may well be injuries in Sunderland. You've got firefighters now dealing with arson, a terrible fire at a police station, scenes of destruction, appalling, unforgivable, unacceptable. Where do we go from here as a country, Paul?
Mark, it's awful because it sounds like, from what I understand, in Southport, there were police officers that had the day before been traumatised themselves because they found the scene of those dead and injured children that were then having to defend themselves against rioters. You've got 11-year-old child, I understand, that's been accused of setting light to a vehicle. You've got the a police station there ablaze, and we've seen that happen. We've really got to make sure that we can come down on this hard, but we've got to understand, but we've also got to actually make sure that we're not inflaming the situation by just having this division in conversation from Whitehall, from Westminster, when you're just writing off a load of people as all being far right. This is being agitated by some people from the far right, but not everybody on those streets are in the far right. If you just dismiss them as that,
is that something that Sir Keir Starmer did? Did he point the finger too exclusively at the far right? Some people think that is a distraction, that is cover for wider issues in our country that the political establishment aren't willing to face up to.
I think there's a lot of issues that have been unspoken or not spoken in depth enough over the last few years. You'll remember that I got into some travail a few months ago because I was talking about no-go areas. And when I actually was talking about prejudice that we're not tackling, because there's lots of the political class that say, there's nothing to see here, there's no problem, I'm just writing you off as one of these agitators. Of course there's a problem. We can see that now coming out in people's tension, people's anger, but it's being fueled by agitators, it's being fueled by alcohol, but behind that there are people with legitimate concerns. And so we've got to make sure we can divide the two and actually hammer down really hard on these people that are creating the scenes that we're seeing on the screen at the moment, whilst tackling prejudice, whilst tackling migration, and actually making sure the vast, vast majority of people who have concerns don't feel that they're getting attached to these people in any way, shape or form.
Now, Paul, we got you on to talk about the Tory leadership, but of course this developing story has changed the agenda, and I do look forward to getting you back on to talk about the race for a replacement to Rishi Sunak, which will happen in November. But we really appreciate your considered thoughts on what are worrying scenes in the North East. My thanks to Paul Scully, former Conservative Minister and, of course, ex-Tory MP. Thank you, Paul. We've got a statement now from Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, and she has said criminals attacking the police and stoking disorder on our streets will pay the price for their violence and thuggery. The police have the full backing of government to take the strongest possible action and ensure that they face the full force of the law. They do not represent Britain. Really worrying scenes. Our country is in trouble at the moment. Anger, violence, disorder in some of our major cities. Has the Prime Minister got to brace himself for a summer of political violence and chaos? We'll discuss that next with tomorrow's papers. Don't go anywhere.
Good evening. Here's your GB News weather from the Met Office. It is going to be relatively warm, not as hot as it has been, but warm and sunny at times through much of this weekend, though there will be some rain pushing through. Initially, we have a front making its way southeastwards through this evening and overnight. That's already brought quite a bit of rain across Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it's now clearing these areas, and so here it is going to turn mostly dry overnight with some clear skies. For England and Wales, though, turning increasingly cloudy, and there will be some outbreaks of rain around. Where we have the cloud, temperatures aren't going to drop much. Another warm night to come, but quite a bit fresher across Scotland and Northern Ireland, dropping into single figures, particularly in more rural spots. But first thing tomorrow, across many parts of England and Wales, it is going to be a bit grey initially. There will be some outbreaks of rain around, and worth bearing in mind, some of the rain could be a little bit heavy at times. A bit brighter first thing across North Wales and much of Northern England, though some cloud here and there. A brighter start for Scotland and Northern Ireland, just a couple of showers starting to feed their way in from the west as we go through the morning. Eastern Scotland getting off to a lovely fine start to the day with plenty of sunshine here. Those showers, though, across western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland will become more widespread here as we go through the afternoon, and some heavy ones are quite likely. Meanwhile, across the southern southeastern parts of England, here we will have some bursts of rain through the day, and these could be heavy at times before they clear away later. Elsewhere, a good deal of dry, bright and sunny weather, and with temperatures, albeit not as high as they have been, getting into the mid-20s, it will feel warm in any sunshine. Sunday should get off to a fairly fine start, albeit a fresher start than of late for many of us, before some wetter weather starts to push its way in from the northwest, and this is likely to bring some heavy rain as we go into the beginning of next week, so do watch out for some high rainfall totals, particularly across northern and western parts. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, scenes of chaos and carnage in Sunderland as a major police station is on fire. There's chaos. Cars have been overturned. Public disorder with sad echoes of what happened in Southport on Tuesday in the aftermath of the murder of 3 little girls at a dance class. So we're going to pretty much throw the running order out of the window and focus on that story for most likely the duration of the show, because it paints a picture of a country in disorder and a new Prime Minister in Sir Keir Starmer who may have to brace himself for a summer of political violence. However, of course, Fleet Street haven't got this story just yet, but let's see what they do have. And we start with the Daily Mirror, and of course, in media terms, it's the only story in town. I was in need, but Huw Edwards groomed me. The young man whose relationship with Huw Edwards set in motion the stars fall from grace has spoken exclusively to the Mirror about his ordeal. The man who was a teenager and highly vulnerable when Edwards first asked him for explicit photos has told the Mirror he feels the BBC newsreader took advantage of him, and most damningly says that the star, of course once the face of BBC News, groomed him. I was in need, but Huw groomed me. The damning headline in that Mirror exclusive. The Eye weekend now. Thousands of affordable homes stand empty despite housing crisis. Daily Telegraph, Kemi Badenoch, we need a better plan for integration. And nuclear sub-software carried out by Belarusians. Daily Mail, Southport horror. stabbing suspect was a star for the BBC show Children in Need. The Times, extra police and prison cells to stop more riots. And there's my old mate Giles Corran, looking very young and handsome. Giles Corran goes large in Ibiza, but he did do yoga at dawn. That wouldn't suit him. He's not a morning person. Daily Express now. Glorious gold rush. Team GB in dreamland after 3 more Olympic victories. Britain cannot let rioting thugs win is the other headline. Extremist thugs must not be allowed to win amid fears a summer of riots is about to explode across the nation. Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly said ministers must back the police to do what is necessary to maintain law and order and stop further escalation. The Guardian, police braced for unrest from shameful far right. OK, those are your front pages. Let's get reaction now from my top pundits this evening. Journalist and author Harriet Sargent, TV news legend John Sargent, and entrepreneur and social commentator Joanna Jarju. Well, John Sargent, let's have a look at the politics of this. A major headache for our new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer.
Very much a headache. No, this is something which he knows that, in fact, you can't have some sort of magical solution across every town. He does know that there are real problems in some areas. They're different sort of problems. They're arguing about different things often. There is a tension sometimes between people coming from outside and the local people. The local people may have issues with the police, and those can vary according to each area. So the idea that you simply sort of treat it as if that's it, the whole country's ablaze and we must stop it. It's not as simple as that. It's very complicated. And the advantage that Keir Starmer has is that his long years as the chief prosecutor, prosecuting all sorts of people. He knows a lot about the police structure. He knows about the setup. He's even before been on those committees, those emergency committees. He was there when he was in the his prosecution job. So, in a way, he's someone who doesn't need a great deal of briefing as to what you do in these situations. He also knows how difficult it is.
Indeed, this is a law and order issue. It's the primary focus of the Home Secretary. But do you think this new government needs, over time, to look at what is behind rioting like this?
Yeah, no, they'll look at all of the different reasons, and there'll be more attempts, that it always is, to try and, narrow it down. There's a survey that was done to an academic survey saying there are all sorts of different arguments being used. But as far as the government at the moment have got to concern themselves with, it is a law and order issue where they've got to make sure, as much as possible, that they act to stop the outside forces being so obviously very important in these areas. It's interesting how good the police intelligence was. They knew there was going to be trouble. They said there was going to be trouble.
Harriet, what do you think about what the Prime Minister does next, what his next move is? I mean, obviously, he's got to keep order on the streets. But do the government need to have a look at our society and understand why there seems to be bubbling anger out there?
Yes, I think so. And I think just to ignore that would be extremely bad for this country. I mean, he has to be fair, and he has to be seen to be acting the same with every different community, not just singling one community out and seem to be on their side just because he's worried about their votes.
I mean, do you see a difference in the way that the policing has sort of played out here in Sunderland and, let's say, Leeds 2 weeks ago, when a family objected to children being placed into care?
Yes, the police there retreated. We didn't see they just simply took off and left the rioters to carry on.
Now, Joanna, what do you think is behind the scenes that we've witnessed this week, tonight in Sunderland and earlier in the week, Hartlepool and Southport?
From what I've been seeing on social media, that's the only, kind of vehicle that I can judge it on. A lot of the noise has been more so about immigration and people kind of feeling as if people are coming in and causing harm to British children. And I think people have been basically expressing their grief, you know, in that community and even outside of that community in different ways. But, you know, it's been proven as time has gone on and we've been privy to more information that the suspect in this situation is actually a second-generation Rwandan who is a Christian. So earlier on in the week, we were seeing a lot of attacks on the Muslim community in Southport, seeing more attacks across the week in different communities of the Muslim faith, of mosques and things like that. But, you know, you kind of, it begs the question, who radicalised this Christian then? Because if it was actually proven that this individual was a Muslim, then we'd be having all of these conversations. So we need to think about it in that context. But I also think that when I saw that this was a 17-year-old boy, I almost started to draw parallels to when we see school shootings as well in America. And in that situation where race isn't as much of the hot topic and immigration, and when it usually is white American white boys that are teenagers that go into a school and kill other children, we talk about mental health and we talk about, you know, this person was bullied at school. And it's just a shame that in this situation, I'm not saying that this particular suspect deserves any type of sympathy. I'm just talking about in terms of just looking at this across the board of how we treat situations like this, whether it's here or across the pond, what the actual solution would be and how we should look at it in that way. Because realistically, like I said, this person is a second-generation Rwandan. Everything that they know is British, and they were brought up as a Christian. So is this really a conversation that we should be having about immigration, or is it the fact that the misinformation that we had at the beginning of the week has then spilled out, and then now it's a conversation about immigration?
Harriet?
Because it really shouldn't be if we're looking at the identity of the suspect.
We just don't know. I mean, we don't know what's happened. We do know that this boy barely has come out of his house. The neighbours said they very rarely see him. And from my knowledge of dealing with teenage boys and writing and investigating them, they just spend a lot of time online.
Indeed.
And we don't know what has
let me stop you there, because, of course, it's an ongoing case and police investigation is underway. But, of course, you're entitled to your view. Now, if you're just joining us, let me tell you that there are scenes of chaos in Sunderland. A police station has been set on fire, cars overturned, trouble very similar to what happened in Southport earlier in the week, perhaps not on the same scale, but still a cause for great concern. And here's a statement from the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, who has said criminals attacking the police and stoking disorder on our streets will pay the price for their violence and thuggery. The police have the full backing of government to take the strongest possible action and ensure they face the full force of the law. They do not represent Britain. Harriet, how do we fix our broken society?
I have an answer.
I am not sure at all. I mean, I think the way that Keir Starmer's going about it is certainly not going to fix it. I think a sort of absolute willful blindness on a part of so many politicians, so many of our metropolitan elite, is certainly not going to fix it. That so much of what goes on in the UK is confined to this London-centric view. If you travel to places like Sunderland or any of these places where these riots are taking place, it's a very, very different country, which is not really understood from here. And until you begin to understand what is driving these people, what's in their minds, and also to give them, to not just dismiss them, but actually to take seriously their concerns. This country is going to remain broken.
Well, look, Joanna Jarju and John Sargent have a lot to say about this. How do we heal our broken country, our divided society? Catherine Birbalsingh, of course, Britain's strictest head teacher, who runs a very multiracial school in London, has said that multiculturalism is a good idea, it's got great potential, but that it's failing at the moment. Why is that? And why are we seeing scenes of appalling violence and chaos and disorder in our great cities? The scenes are horrific. They are unacceptable. They are wrong. They are devastating for the locals. But why is it happening? More on this next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
apparently almost 70% of 18 to 25-year-olds, we don't know whether that's men or women, but they say that women shouldn't breastfeed in public. 19% would even go as far as labelling it disgusting.
Well, only a quarter of Brits say that women shouldn't have to cover up when they're breastfeeding. So clearly there is a big debate here and one to get to the bottom of. And to do so, we're joined by parenting journalist Annette Kellu. Really good to see you this morning, Annette.
Really good to see you.
Why is this stigma still existing in our society?
I think we've got a case here going on of double standards. I don't know about you, but I live near a park, OK? One little hint of sun, the men get completely naked. Honestly, you've never seen anything like it. The bodies are out, all different shapes and sizes. So why is it not OK for a woman to feed her baby? You know, we've got this whole thing. They're OK to be naked doing what they want. Why can't a woman just feed her baby? Why is it shameful in 2024? And it's interesting what you say about the 18 to 25-year-olds, because I really want to know, are they men or women? Because I feel like they'd be men.
I was going to say, have you got a hunch? Have you got a suspicion?
Yes, I have. And I think as well, they're thinking of them as sexy time, you know? And I feel like they're not... Well, maybe that's because they're bombarded with images and they see things like that they're seeing it in that context. But it's really not. It's feeding the baby. It's simple. Shouldn't be shameful.
But do you think for men it's like they can't see the difference? There's so much porn in society, isn't there, that breasts are sexualised and seen as this sexual object and not actually for their main primary purpose, which is actually feeding a child.
Immediate association.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they can't.
And you can't see that they could have two functions.
Absolutely. And to them as well, I feel like they see it, and on the other side of it, they think like, ooh, mummy, and that brings up weird feelings for them, maybe.
GB News, the People's Channel.
That's my whole life.
Welcome back. If you're joining us, developing tonight, this is in Sunderland. Disorder and chaos. A major police station in Sunderland is on fire. It looks to have been targeted by thugs, by agitators. The Prime Minister has referred to right-wing, hard-right forces that have been going to different parts of the country, looking for trouble, looking to hijack public upset and anger about, of course, what happened on Monday. 3 little girls murdered in cold blood in Southport. There was violence and disorder in Southport on Tuesday. It spread. We've seen it in Hartlepool, and we're seeing it tonight in Sunderland, perhaps not on the same scale, but let me tell you that protesters have clashed with police as they gathered in Sunderland for a planned demonstration linked to the Southport knife attack. Stones and beer cans were thrown at police who were wearing riot gear outside a mosque in the city. The cops have got good intelligence. As John Sargent said, they saw this coming. Mounted officers pushed back demonstrators, some of whom were in masks. Northumbria Police said its officers have been subjected to serious violence and advised members of the public to avoid the area. Police also had beer barrels thrown at them as young men chanted, "Whose streets? Our streets." Cars in the city centre have been targeted by the group, with one overturned car being set on fire. The unrest, as I've said, follows riots in Hartlepool, in which Cleveland Police said was linked to protests in terms of what happened in Southport. Listen, let's get more reaction from my pundits this evening. Journalist and author Harriet Sargent, TV news legend John Sargent, and entrepreneur and social commentator Joanna Jarju. Joanna, do you want to pick up on what Harriet was saying just a few minutes ago about the root causes of all this anger?
I think the root causes is social media. That's where it spreads, you know, like wildfire. And I think that if I was Keir Starmer and this new government, I would be really focusing on misinformation. There is nothing wrong with people being angry about certain things, even if they're angry about things that I don't necessarily agree with. But it just has to at least be fact, right?
Most definitely.
So, and I think that's one of the biggest problems that we've seen this week, the amount of misinformation. And then now people are just like, well, this is actually the opportunity for me to just go and kind of express all of my frustrations about all different facets of things.
Absolutely. What about Harriet's point, though, about northern towns which are not perhaps as well integrated as here in the capital, for example, where you've got communities living parallel lives, not engaging with British values, maybe not speaking the language, and sometimes not following the rule of law?
Well, I don't think that the people, let's call, I don't know, let's say immigrants, for example, or anybody who isn't white, right, in these northern towns, I don't think that they behave any differently to how they behave in London, for example. I think what's different is maybe how they're received. I think that in London, people are a lot more, I guess, or down south. I'm going to use London as the best example, obviously. People are used to living in more of a multicultural society. And I think what can happen in the other side of things is people feel as if they can't integrate because they feel as if they're not welcome to begin with. And I can speak on something like this because I'm somebody who is, quote unquote, an immigrant, even though I'm Black British. And I come from a northern town where I was the only Black person in my primary school, for example. So I get this. And I have also experienced severe racism to the point where my next door neighbour at one point has actually posted dog poo on newspaper in my letterbox. And we had to get an actual bar across our letterbox because we were concerned that one day it was going to be something that actually would be set on fire. So I just want to finish this point by saying that there wasn't a big, African community in the town that I grew up in. But if you were in my position, living with a single mum, and things like that were happening to you, and you thought somebody was going to petrol bomb your house next time, and it wasn't just going to be something as, quote-unquote, innocent as dog poo, you probably wouldn't want to necessarily integrate. So I'm just saying it works both ways. There's other people who don't make the effort to integrate, which I think they should, and then also there's other people who also don't feel welcome.
Fair enough. John?
I think the key thing to bear in mind, I suppose, is that the majority across the whole country don't want violence. I mean, the idea that somehow it'll spread because it's sort of exciting, yes, it's true for a minority, but most people, if there's a threat of violence, get frightened, they get very disturbed, they don't like what they see, and they close their front doors. The idea that the moment there's a riot, a normal person then rushes out to join in because they feel strongly about this, that and the other, they don't. And it's interesting, even with a campaign as violent as the IRA campaign, when did Sinn Féin begin to pick up their real vote? When they renounced violence. Now, that is the point. Is people do learn from these things. The mistake, I think, is to imagine that it's static, that things are always going to be a certain way, that things aren't going to change. People are affected by seeing on social media that they're often wrong and they're misinformed. These things take time for people to realise. Don't trust social media because they can often be simply wrong.
Although,
that takes time.
Absolutely. Joanna Jarji, do you disagree with Catherine Birbalsingh that multiculturalism can work, but is currently failing?
Well, clearly, the scenes that we're seeing at the moment all across the country is showing that something is very wrong. I think that multiculturalism, it's almost like two ends of the spectrum. It's either going very well in certain areas, and then there's concerns and a lot of work to be done in other areas. And I think it's about looking at what type of information and how people feel in those particular areas. Is it that those areas have been left behind? So then, there's information that's then being told to say, OK, actually, look at your neighbour. It's because of him that's actually stealing something from you. I don't see anybody... There are people in London, and people look at London, and for me as a northerner, I did for a very long time, as if it was like the streets are paved with gold and everybody's just so rich down here. No, there are people down here who are struggling just as much as they are in Bradford and wherever else, but they're also living next door to immigrants. And why is it that the person who's struggling in a council estate in London isn't necessarily blaming their neighbour, and the people maybe in other areas, more remote areas,
absolutely.
are?
Harriet, you've done a lot of work with deprived communities, and you've spent time with gangs and tried to get under the skin of the people at the bottom end of the economic ladder. So, what's your experience?
Well, I think that everybody, and I think, in a way, I don't think this is about racism. I think it's about numbers and the sheer numbers of people coming into the country with, at the same time, the lack of infrastructure that is being put in place for these people.
So you think if we didn't have the illegal boat crossings and if we had low levels of legal net migration, maybe 50,000 a year...
And you had infrastructure.
If those two things were the case, you don't think we would have this trouble tonight?
I don't think nearly as much.
I completely disagree.
Do you disagree?
Completely disagree.
I mean, sorry, we don't have hospitals. We don't. I mean, so Bristol has a population of 500,000, and it has 6 hospitals. Now we had 1.3 million came in just last year legally. So we should be building 2.5 hospitals.
But are you not making an excuse?
Yeah.
Are you not handing an excuse to far-right thugs who have organised this violence tonight?
Yeah.
Are you not giving them cover for their
Well, I
vile,
think what is happening,
vile disruption
well, I hope
and
I'm
crimes?
doing the opposite. I would like to think I was doing the opposite, because I think that what is happening is that those far-right thugs would be a tiny, tiny minority who no one would listen to. But the trouble is that decent, ordinary people who feel that their views are not being taken any notice of, are being dismissed, find that the only...
But they're not the people burning... They're not burning...
They're not going out and rioting.
They're not... Yeah.
John, I think what Harriet's sort of saying...
The idea they're getting so cross about all these things, they run
Harriet, finish your point.
I think because so many people feel that nobody is actually articulating their views in a way that is not inflammatory.
OK, so, John, how about this? We can all, I think, condemn 100% the far right, disgusting, vile people, troublemakers, violent. They're hurting our police officers. They're destroying these towns. But for public anger around issues of legal net migration, the boats, all the rest of it, by calling all of those people far right and bigots and racists, are the establishment gaslighting decent, ordinary people whose lives are being impacted by a society that's not working for them anymore?
No, I think I don't know.
Do you acknowledge that?
No, can I just...
You were at the BBC for a long time, so it might be a hard pill to swallow.
All right, can I just have a few seconds to answer? Of course, we just had an election where there's been an enormous movement which has produced the biggest majority that you've ever imagined for an opposition coming into power. Why? Because people are perfectly well aware that all the things that are going wrong, and they voted that way. So you can't what you can't do is then have the whole thing all over again as if there's no change of government, nothing's been expressed. In many ways, our democracy has just recently passed a test.
4 million votes for Nigel Farage?
All right, and millions of votes for other people.
Can I just make a distinction?
3 million fewer voters for Keir Starmer.
Can I just make a distinction?
OK, folks, listen, let me tell you, it's been a very important evening, a very busy evening. Thank you to my amazing pundits. Tensions are running high. We're all worried about what's happening in the country, and we will return to this conversation. Do stay tuned. Headliners is next. I'm back tomorrow at 10 a.m. with Tatiana, and back at 9 as well. It's a busy 24 hours.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your GB News weather from the Met Office. It is going to be relatively warm, not as hot as it has been, but warm and sunny at times through much of this weekend, though there will be some rain pushing through. Initially, we have a front making its way southeastwards through this evening and overnight. That's already brought quite a bit of rain across Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it's now clearing these areas, and so here it is going to turn mostly dry overnight with some clear skies. For England and Wales, though, turning increasingly cloudy, and there will be some outbreaks of rain around. Where we have the cloud, temperatures aren't going to drop much. Another warm night to come, but quite a bit fresher across Scotland and Northern Ireland, dropping into single figures, particularly in more rural spots. But first thing tomorrow, across many parts of England and Wales, it is going to be a bit grey initially. There will be some outbreaks of rain around, and worth bearing in mind, some of the rain could be a little bit heavy at times. A bit brighter first thing across North Wales and much of northern England, though some cloud here and there. A brighter start for Scotland and Northern Ireland, just a couple of showers starting to feed their way in from the west as we go through the morning. Eastern Scotland getting off to a lovely fine start to the day with plenty of sunshine here. Those showers, though, across western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland will become more widespread here as we go through the afternoon, and some heavy ones are quite likely. Meanwhile, across the southern southeastern parts of England, here we will have some bursts of rain through the day, and these could be heavy at times before they clear away later. Elsewhere, a good deal of dry, bright and sunny weather, and with temperatures, albeit not as high as they have been, getting into the mid-20s.